All right, so I think the stream thinking about things ready to go though. So hello everybody, make ZardX here, back at it again to give you another exciting podcast episode. That being my ZardCast podcast, episode 49. Golly, so close to the big 5-0. That should happen a couple of weeks from now. Later, what is it, the last Sunday in the month of January though? I got some plans for that one, so you can kind of look forward to that one though. But as for now though, yes, would it be in the month of January? It's still not a whole bunch of stuff going on. There is a few little news topics I was going to go ahead and talk about because PlayStation managed to announce a new accessibility controller. They talked about some of the sales of the PS5. I'll go over a little bit of that. And then there was a Xbox Direct or Developer Direct, is like what they like to call it. We have that coming up though. So I'll talk about those couple of topics first before I go and jump into the meat and potatoes of the whole entire theme for this podcast, that being my year in review part two, which will talk about all of the games that we gotten in the second half of the year from literally from July all the way to December. I say all. You know how this year in reviews go. Stuff that's most relevant to me or things I wanted to point out. Can't go over every single thing, unfortunately, or we'll be here all night and into the early part of the morning though. But yeah, so honestly, that's the stuff I have planned to talk about tonight, though. So, without any further ado, let's go ahead and jump straight up into that gaming news. All right, so first up on the docket, let's talk about that Xbox Direct that was revealed because they did manage to say that even though I say Xbox Direct, they call it a developer direct. And it's always weird with these Xbox shows that they always do because I always look at these and I'm like, man, they had some really long shows back in the day where it's like Inside Xbox, I think is what they called it. And literally it was like hours upon hours. I remember some shows being 2 or 3 hours long. You never would catch me sitting down watching all of that. I might have saw some highlights or whatnot though. But they're calling it a developer direct. It's Xbox as well as Bethesda. So they're basically going to talk about most of the games that are going to come out in the first half of this year, though. So we know that Redfall was one of them. They already mentioned that out in like one of their tweets or whatnot, though. And the other one that people were expecting, Starfield, even though they say the first half of this year, though, they literally said in like one of their messages where they were like, "Hey, for a game like Starfield, we want to make sure that we give it its own presentation because it's like a really big meaty game though." And so they said, "Hey, that will get its own presentation. That will happen some point a little later on though. So it'll be after that January 25th date though. So we have that to look forward to though. But some of the games that they'll be talking about, those will be talking about Elder Scrolls Online, Forza Motorsport, Minecraft Legends, and Redfall being like the biggest one of that though. And yeah, literally verbatim for what they said. They said to dedicate the proper amount of time for a deep dive into Bethesda's game studio Starfield, a standalone show is in the works. So yeah, so that's some of the things you can kind of look forward to within that developer direct. I wonder if it's going to be more so with, I guess as the title suggests, it's going to be more so the developers kind of talking about it. Hopefully, there's not like a whole bunch of fluff. Even though, yes, it is kind of interesting to see what the developers have to say on certain games like that. But when we don't necessarily have it in our games, I feel like there's a time and place for this though. But I think when the developers talk about this stuff, I feel like it might be more impactful or more substantial once you have the game in your hands, so you can kind of see exactly what they went with the whole process because you actually have something physical and tangible that you can go through and play. So that way you can make a lot of references to what they say, though. I don't know. It's the way how they kind of handle this, though. But at this point in the game, literally you have Nintendo with their directs and you have Sony with their state of plays. So I kind of wish that Xbox had its own kind of thing that's similar to that because Nintendo has mastered it. The state of play has been coming along a little bit better because at first they didn't know how to close the events out or anything like that, though. But now I'm thinking they're doing a whole lot better with that, though. So I mean, I think Xbox just needs to figure out something. Pick a brand name, whatever though, and stick with it and get within that formula. Because I think that's like the most efficient way of getting news out to your fans in terms of more recent projects or games that are about to come out. Thankfully, they're not trying to get super crazy with their launch windows, and they're trying to keep stuff within a year's span. So I always like that with Nintendo. They kind of keep their cards close to the chest, so we're not waiting a really long time. There are a few exceptions like what Metroid Prime 4 and The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom though, but it doesn't happen that often though. But yeah, so that's honestly what we can all look forward to with the developer direct right there. So if you're a fan of Xbox, y'all got the first presentation of the year. The Xbox managed to come out swinging before Nintendo and before Sony though, so y'all have that to look forward to. But I'm pretty sure that's pretty much all I have to go through and talk about and discuss, at least for that one topic. So let's go ahead and swing it over to the other one, that being Sony managed to announce its new accessibility controllers. I think it was like at a certain event. I think it's literally called, what is it, CES? Or something like that though. But it's like a certain event that Sony usually holds yearly, and they kind of announce new upcoming hardware or certain kind of stuff where you can run into their statistics on their software or not soft hardware sales. And that's honestly what you can look at though. But at least with this one, because I think what was it, the last event that they did, they literally showed the PS5 logo. The no shocker, no surprise that not it, people could have predicted that or whatever though. But at this presentation, they literally announced these accessibility controllers, and I think that's a good thing that Sony is trying to hit upon, because I think technically Microsoft did it first, and with their kind of controllers, it's actually compatible. You can use it with the Switch and whatnot though, so it's a little more universal with their controller though. So that was nice that they got the ball on it and started it rolling though. But at least PlayStation has its own version for it as well though, because not everybody happens to have, what is it, all their hands or fingers or whatnot though, to be able to play, games like how most other people are able to. Assuming you have all your ligaments and fingers and phalanges and all of that stuff. So it is nice because people, you might know some people, or you might know some wartime heroes or whatnot though. People that are less unfortunate to be able to have everything like most other people do. And it is nice that Sony is actually being able to address that. So I really do like and I really do appreciate that though. And I imagine these controllers are going to be a little bit more on the expensive side, obviously, because if you look at the image here on the YouTube version side of this podcast, you see there was like you got one controller literally being what would be like the left hand side of the controller, and the other controller being for the right hand side though. I mean, just looking at it, I mean, honestly, you'd be looking at it, be like, huh, how can that be accessible for most other people though? But I imagine they probably put a lot of research and time up into it. That way it can kind of adapt to like pretty much hopefully anybody's situation, no matter where they're at. So that way they can be able to still play and enjoy most games that is offered on that PlayStation 5 though. So that is really cool though. The other thing we got at this event was an update on their sales statistics. And we did figure out that yes, there is currently a little over 30 million units that have been sold for the PlayStation 5 as of this point though. So literally this is like what reported in like early January. You can it's literally 2 months off from the anniversary of this. Remember, the system dropped during COVID in the year of 2020. So like was it 2 years and 2 months basically. Um Not even 2 months though, but we'll say 2 years, 2 months, and managed to sell 30 million consoles. So that's about what, 15 million per year? So it's not a bad statistic considering how we had the chip shortage and all of that crazy stuff happening during the pandemic and whatnot though. They did report and say that basically the chip shortage is over, so they're able to pump out these PlayStation 5s to a whole lot more people. People are actually have been reporting that you're actually able to go into stores now and be able to find these consoles now, not necessarily have to wait, for you to be online where you had to be like a Best Buy Total Tech member, or maybe you're like Walmart, what is it called? Walmart Plus or Walmart Plus, that kind of specialty service, whatever though, or just anywhere else, whether you're buying it from Target online or GameStop online, you don't have to necessarily wait for those consoles to drop online for them to almost instantly sell out now. You have a chance now to actually go into the stores and buy those now. So that is pretty nice to know right there though. I guess if you were to stack it up with the Switch, what I think by the time we get to March of this year, it'll be the Nintendo Switch will have sold a little north of 120 million units. And what was it at that time? What was it? The Switch came out in 2017, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23. By then, it will be on the market for about 6 years. So 120, if we're going off at 120 amount, 124 to 6 years. That's literally about 20 million per year. So if you're thinking about the PS5 being 15 million per year, it is a little behind the ball in the projected sales compared to the Switch, though. But we'll have to wait and see exactly, how many potential PS5s they could sell within a fiscal year, with no constraints behind the chip shortage or anything like that, though. So yeah, so honestly, some pretty good reports from the PlayStation. Glad to see that more people are going to be able to buy it, and not just more people be able to buy it, but thanks to these accessible controllers, no matter who you are, hopefully you'll still be able to enjoy anything that the PS5 has to offer in terms of their software for whatever game that might pique your interest or whatnot, though. So yeah, I think that's pretty much it in terms of most of the topics I have to go through and discuss. Just mainly, primarily, just those two main topics, though. And then this should be the last podcast after I get done with the year end review stuff, where we should be pretty light in news because starting the next podcast episode for episode 50, by then we'll have a couple of games come out. We'll have like Fire Emblem Engage, we'll have Persona 4 Golden and 3 Portable and stuff like that. And I imagine some more news and stuff will probably start picking up. And then obviously I have some special events for 50. We'll kind of get more into the normal swing of things, and there'll be some more, hopefully, news to report on. It'll still be the tail end into January, though, but at least by then, we'll have a little bit more stuff to talk about. Also, I'll be able to have the time to talk about most of the games I played since like what mid December and all through the rest of January, which I hadn't had time to because I was focusing on talking about my year in review. So actually, I'll be able to take the time to be able to talk about that in the next podcast episode, though. So you can have all of that stuff to look forward to as well. But that's going to basically do it in terms of the gaming news. So now let's go ahead and jumping on over into that year in review part two for the year of 2022. All right, so here we go with the part two for the year in review. Now, if you hadn't already done so, I did already talk about my part one, which talked about all the games releasing from January of 2022 to June. In the previous podcast episode, what was it? Episode 48. That's where I went through and talked about all of that stuff. So if you're curious to hear about any of my thoughts on those previous games, make sure to give that podcast episode a listen. That way you can hear my full thoughts on the whole rundown from for the first half of the year, though. But starting with the second half of the year, let's go ahead and start back off in the month of July, because I feel like July, those summer months, we always have quite a bit of stuff that usually manages to come out in that month. And the first on the list is Live Alive. That came out on July the 22nd. That game right there did some numbers, at least for me. Why am I not sold like crazy amounts? Because I think like what it was like exclusive on the Nintendo Switch. I think it might have sold somewhere between 500,000 and a million. Hopefully it hits that million marker, though. But that game was phenomenal, at least in my own eyes, because the fact that you were able to go through and play through all of these different story routes in different points in time. You had everything from like the Wild Wild West to the near future where you're fighting with some mechs and stuff, which oh my gosh, that literally was like anime right there. Like they literally started off with like an anime opening right there, though. I was like, oh freaking shoot. They had stuff like that. They had the distant future with the cyborg or the technically robot. They had everything from like the past stuff where it was like you going around. Literally, it was like an old cartoon. You could think of like an old cartoon like the Flintstones, but imagine them not even talking. But the way how they kind of showed and addressed and uh, basically through the character interactions, the sounds that they made, and the expressions they gave off, you could essentially tell or what they were feeling at the time as the story was progressing through. It was an interesting story to tell between that. What was it? There was like Imperial China, Japan one, and a few other ones. I'm just not thinking off the top of my head, though. And then obviously like a fantasy one that we'll say towards the very end. And then the way how they all combined their stories at the very end of the game, man, that was just absolutely crazy. Obviously, we won't talk about spoilers or anything like that, though. But it was a nice bite-sized adventure. It was like what 25, 30 hours at top, something like that, though. But yeah, honestly, if you hadn't gone through and played Live Alive, I highly recommend it because that's a beautiful, stunning HD 2D game right there. Now, next up on the list, Xenoblade Chronicles 3. A stinking phenomenal game right there. Shoot, if you hadn't gone and played that game, I don't know what you're doing. You need well, after you're done finishing this podcast episode, you need to go out, you need to buy yourself a copy. It's too late to get the Xenoblade Chronicles 3 special edition thing, because oh man, that was a debauchery going through all of that whole freaking shoot. But this game right here, these Xenoblade games can tell some really good stories. If I have to do say so myself, the way how they did the combat up in this game, the fact that you can control six given party members at any given point and freely swap between them while you're in the midst of battle is really cool. The way how they handle side quests and hero quests, where the hero quests actually felt more so on the lines of actual things that was like pretty close and pretty relevant to the story, even though it technically was, it's still technically optional. But I felt like it almost felt like to me it was like essential because they went pretty deep in that story right there though. And I just love all the characters between Noah and Mio, their interactions between those two. And gosh dang it, that ending though. Oh, I can't talk about the spoilers. And then you had Senna as well as Lance, and then Tyon along with Uni. Oh my gosh, it was just an amazing cast of characters, a very well done story. The whole motive of the whole entire story just centered around life in general. Man, it just hit some really good strides. I was like, man, I can't say much more than this because I will have an upcoming video coming out literally this upcoming Friday, and I'll probably talk about a little bit more up in there though. But that's just a little bit of a teaser for y'all who happen to be listening to this though. But yeah, so honestly, Xenoblade Chronicles 3, a really amazing game and one of my most favorite of the year. All right, and I think that's pretty much it in terms of the games that have launched out in the month of July. So we'll go ahead and jump on over to the month of August, because on August the 15th, we had Multiversus that managed to come out. And with Multiversus, it was weird because I remember this one coming up to the launch of it. They had like all these was it open beta? No, not open beta. I think it was technically closed betas or whatnot. So I never got into one of them. But I think a couple of my friends did, and it was an interesting concept because literally, like, what you have Smash Brothers, and that game is freaking fantastic and whatnot though. And then you had a game that came on with Nick All Stars Brawl, which recently my brother actually managed to get that for Christmas. I managed to play with that with him on that game a little bit, so I have a little concept, and a little background on how that game operates though. And then it was like Warner Brothers decided to take a crack at the Smash style of game right there. And honestly, it was interesting because it was primarily focused on 2v2 battles. Yes, you could still do 1v1, but I think the primary focus on it was 2v2s. And it was crazy to think you can put all these characters together. You can put Shaggy with Batman and Wonder Woman with Tom and Jerry. And I think didn't they put my boy Gandalf up in there? I think he did, man. Because I was like, literally, I don't know if he's in there or not, but I was like, the second he's in there, he could be in there for all I know. I was like, that'll be the dude I'll have to go with because I have to go with the dude that's like, you shall not pass. I was like, I don't know. That had to be a taunt or something like that because I was like, man, oh shoot. But with this one, it was interesting because a lot of people were talking about it. It was blowing up. It's technically a free to play game. So I was like, okay, you know what? That allowed to bring a lot of people in, that allow a lot of people to get up in there without necessarily have to pay a upfront cost. But then I guess you had all the microtransactions up in it though. So I hadn't personally played it. At some point, maybe I will. Maybe some point this year if I get some time, or I'll just ask one of my buddies to say, hey, just tag team up with me. Let's see what this game's all about though. But yeah, so that game did come out early August. Next up on the list, Kirby's Dream Buffet. That came out on August the 17th. This one kind of came randomly out of nowhere because I think if memory serves me right, I want to say that this one came out during during the middle of a week, random week. They dropped like a Twitter trailer on their Twitter account and said, "Hey, Kirby's Dream Buffet coming soon." And later on, we found out about the date on it, though. I think that's how that basically played out, though. But literally, you're going through. It's like it's not really like an expensive game. It's really like a budget game. I think it's like what $15 or $20 at most on the Nintendo eShop. But you're literally rolling around as Kirby. You're going through these obstacle courses, like things, and you're literally blitzing through them, trying to collect as many strawberries as possible. And then by the time you get to the end, whoever holds the most strawberries wins. It's like split up into like what three, like a few phases. And you try to do different rounds leading up to that final conclusion though. And yes, you can play it online or you can play it locally with friends or whatnot though. So it's just a nice little bite-sized Kirby thing. So yeah, it kind of came out of left field though, but at the same point, Kirby always gets a lot of games at any given point. I think what was this? This was like Kirby's anniversary. Like you had that, you had like what Kirby in the Forgotten Land, you had like what a Kirby concert as well, and a few other things Kirby related though. I know Bronto, my good buddy Bronto, I know he enjoyed this year because like Kirby's one of his favorite Nintendo IPs. But yeah, so honestly, Kirby had a pretty good year, and that was like literally like one of the last games we had for Kirby wise that came out in the year of 2022. So yeah, a little short, fun size, bite size adventure. Maybe I'll get it at some point, just dabble with it though. But yeah, it's just a nice little game. Next up on the list, on August the 26th, we had Soul Hackers 2. Now, this one right here was a game where literally within the Soul Hackers series. There was only obviously one game before this, and I think like what it's playable on the 3DS. That's one way you can play it though. And I looked at this one and I was like, okay, Atlas made this game, and I was like, okay, Atlas, same people that made Persona, same people that made Shin Megami Tensei series as well though. It's just another Shin Megami series game basically. It's just a subplot being with the Soul Hackers line though. So I was like, oh, okay. Instantly, I was like, you know what? I probably will get this just because I kind of want to dive a little bit more so within this series though. I don't know about like mainline Shin Megami Tensei. Maybe I'll touch it at some point though. But looking at 5 and some of the stuff I saw in there, I was like, I'm not gonna go crazy about Shin Megami Tensei 5. But I looked at Soul Hackers 2. I was like, okay, that one seems a little interesting enough. I'll get it. I currently do have it on my PS5. It's sitting over there in my backlog. Literally, the moment I catch a breath, it will literally be the next game I play when I start digging into my backlog a little bit more. I trimmed through like a few of my games though, but that will be the next one on my list though. But I heard there wasn't like too many hot things that happened at its launch. I know it didn't sell like, extremely good comparison to some other Atlas games though. But I know that this game had a little bit of trouble due to the fact that I think they just didn't market this game super well. That was like one of its issues. And then on top of that, I heard about some things about the game when it reviewed about how I guess some of the dungeons or that you're going through, it's like some of them are kind of generic. So it's like the first time you might be okay with it though, but the next few times after it just kind of feels a little bit repetitious or whatnot though, and not a lot of variety or whatnot though. I think those like some of the two biggest things. Some things with their menus and stuff as well though, but yeah, that was just some of the stuff I heard off of the streets about this game though. But outside of that, if you happen to like the Shin Megami series and whatnot though, you still might find that enjoyable though. I'll probably have some updates in some later podcast episodes whenever I do manage to go hands on with it, and I talk about it in my what you've been playing segment for my podcast though. But yeah, so honestly, we had that game came out on there, pretty cool. Hopefully, when I go through and play through the game, it's actually a fairly good game at best. Next up on the list, we had Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles: The Cowabunga Collection. That came out on literally the last day of August, on August the 30th. And I was looking at that, I was like, this one I really enjoyed it because for the fact that literally for the longest time I wanted to go back and play through the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles the arcade versions like the original one, the first one, that arcade one, because I never managed to go through and beat it though. But I managed to actually go through and actually get this, and literally I already had a fight stick that I had for my Switch. So with literally with playing with that fight stick on my Switch, it literally felt like I was back in the arcade, and it was so great going through and actually managing to beat that arcade game for the first time and actually see the ending of the game. So that was a really nice experience right there. And then also, what was it? Turtles in Time. That was the arcade version I never got to play. So I actually managed to go through and play through that and beat that one. And that game was actually really enjoyable too. So I really did enjoy that as well. It's cool that you're able to go through and play this with obviously with locally with friends and stuff that you might be able to play with though. And in certain select games, you're actually able to play with people online as well, similar to like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Shredder's Revenge that released a couple of months earlier than this, though. But yeah, so honestly, that was really cool. It wasn't just those two games. You literally had like what the Super Nintendo versions of Turtles in Time. You had the Manhattan Project. You had that Ninja Turtle one where it was like the NES one, which that NES one was like freaking hard, man. I was like, I don't know what they were doing back in the day because I was like, I still never finished that game. And then I started playing through it on the Cowabunga collection, which a little side note though is really interesting because you can play with it with any kind of controllers. So I'm actually able to play the NES games the way how they're intended because I'm using the NES online controller. I can play with the Super Nintendo controllers like that, even the Sega Genesis ones for some of those Genesis style games though. So that's pretty cool though. But no, that NES style game for the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles freaking hard, man. Oh shoot. Literally going through and playing through this same game on the Cowabunga collection. Thankfully they had save slots for all of this stuff. Cause I was like, if it weren't for that, honestly, I would have not been able to go through and beat or get as far as where I would have been for this one because there's a ton of levels up in that thing. Like, holy shoot, I still haven't beaten it yet because I paused, I played some other stuff, and then played some other games after, and I never came back around to. At some point, hopefully, I should, and finally, lay to rest that NES game because man, because I think the farthest I usually would ever get would be like there's that one level where it's like you go underwater to deactivate some bombs and I always got past that. But then that next world that comes after that is I literally will die at some point in that world, and I could never manage to get past that. And then I'm in this version, I made it a couple of worlds after that, so I was like, okay, so that was really nice though. So honestly, it was nice to get these Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle games because I've been begging and pleading with Konami. I was like, please just give me my Turtles on the Switch in some shape, form, or fashion. It could have been through the NES Online, the Super Nintendo Online, something like that. They finally gave it to me in a collection. And thankfully, they're not done with all their updates yet because they literally had a recent update where they put even like more games online. Like they put the Super Nintendo version what was it, Turtles in Time. So now you can play that online with friends as well. And then they did some menu options and gameplay options as well, though. So it's nice to still see that game getting updates like that, though. So honestly, it was really cool to be able to have access to playing that Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles arcade game once again. It pairs pretty good and pretty nicely with my Simpsons arcade one up cabinet. So literally, I have like two of my most favorite arcade games accessible to play at any given time, though. So I really do enjoy that. So yeah, we had that Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Cowabunga collection that came out on the last day of August. So let's go ahead and roll over to the month of September because looking at the month of September, maybe there were some other games that interest a lot of other people though. But literally looking at my list, I only have one game. That was none other than Splatoon 3. Now Splatoon 3 whole shoot in the lead up to it, I was genuinely excited, but it didn't feel like they tried to push it advertising wise super crazily like they did with like Splatoon 2 because I felt like a lot of people already knew Splatoon 2. They kind of know the Splatoon formula now at this point. It's literally one of Nintendo's biggest IPs, literally up there with like Animal with Mario, Legend of Zelda, Animal Crossing, all of that stuff. It's like it's crazy to see how within a short span of almost 10 years ish, it's getting close to 10 years. I think like what Splatoon 2 I think came out in like 2015. Yeah, 2015. Literally we're like what year 8 and this thing is already selling gangbusters. I want to say it sold like 5 million within like oh, was it like within the first week or something like something crazy like that. It's easily going to hit 10 million fairly quick though. But Splatoon 3, I loved all the different changes they added up in there. They did add a little bit, a couple of traversal methods while you're able to use like squid surge where you can charge, shoot yourself up a wall real fast. You can do the squid roll where you can duck and weave back and forth and have like little brief frames of invincibility. So that's really nice as well. They went in and added, they changed up how the ranking works, where they have Anarchy Series and Anarchy Open. So basically, they split the rank modes within half and said, hey, play solo with Series, play with friends in Open. That way, it gives you a little more options to play different rank modes. And then also, they slowly, we're getting seasons within this game. So literally every 3 months, we'll get new content updates. We already had one already that dropped in the month of December, where they give you more game, or they give you more weapons. They give you more things that you can collect within the catalog, whether it's the emotes or the gear as well. And then also, literally every 3 months, you also will be able to have access to doing the Salmon Big Run, which thankfully Salmon Run is 24/7 in comparison to Splatoon 2. So that's really nice. And then with the Big Run thing, it happens every 3 months, where literally you do Salmon Run on a traditional, normal Splatoon 3 stage instead of on the Salmon Run stages. So that's really nice to see that. The game has all those updates. You have Tricolor Battle Turf Wars during the Splatfest, a whole new feature right there. And honestly, with as many updates as they're going to always get within this game every few months, this game is going to feel quite different from when we originally launched in 2023. No, 2022, my bad, when this game originally launched in 2022, to when the game will get all of its updates, because they're running all these updates for the next 2 years, leading all the way up to 2024. So yeah, so honestly, this was a really fun game. One of my most favorite games of the year. I already docked over 250 hours up in that game. Literally, the game has only been out for about, was it? It came out in September, October, November, December, almost about 4 months, 250 hours. Yeah, you can tell how much I like some Splatoon. It's like one of the few shooters that actually click with me. But yeah, so honestly, that was the big game for the month of September for me, though. We also had like what the Splatoon 3 Switch OLED that also dropped around this game as well, though. So yeah, honestly, some really good stuff there. Next up on the list, we're rolling over into the month of October. We have one game that I just want to quickly point out real quick. Dragon Ball The Breakers. This one is an interesting one. I do still have it on my Switch. I bought it during like Black Friday-ish time and whatnot when stuff was on sale. I hadn't personally touched it yet, but it is kind of interesting how you go around, like, what was it, squads of 8 or 10 or something like that. You're literally going around, you're trying to do certain tasks and try to basically flee or defeat the major enemy who you're facing with, which literally will either be like what, Frieza, Cell, or Majin Buu. And it's a kind of an interesting. It kind of reminds me of what was it? It kind of reminds me of Fortnite in some aspects, but it's not technically a straight battle royale. It's more like a survival, or go all in and kill them or whatnot, though. So yeah, you have a few options to basically win if you're like the regular people, and then obviously you can also play as the antagonist as well. And then you're just trying to basically go around and defeat all the people, or also sabotage their escape routes and stuff like that. I don't know. At some point, I probably will stream that game and make it a stream series on Twitch or something like that. Hopefully, though. But yeah, I just wanted to point that out, that did come out early October. Next up on the list, Mario and Rabbids Sparks of Hope. That came out on October the 20th. Now, this game right here, honestly, it was pretty cool. They changed quite a bit of stuff in comparison to its predecessor, that being Mario and Rabbids Kingdom Battle. And the fact that you don't run around on a grid base no more, you can freely run around open, shoot at enemies and stuff like that. It seems pretty cool. The roster kind of expanded. Unfortunately, no more Yoshi. I don't know why they took Yoshi out or whatever, though. A little sad and unfortunate, though. But they did put in Bowser in spot of that. And I feel like Rosalie is one of those characters. I feel like she's an unlockable character. I don't know. I hadn't played the game, so that's not a spoiler. I was just throwing something out there. I feel like it is, because you have like a Rabbid Rosalina up in the game, so it only makes sense, right? And it was interesting. And I guess actually in this game, you can mix and match your allies to where you can choose all Rabbids or you can choose all Mario characters. Because I think in Mario Rabbids Kingdom Battle, you literally have to have like a combination of the two. That's the way how that game operated. But at least this one, you can literally set up your people no matter which style of gameplay you want to play, or based upon your favorite characters. You can play it in any kind of style that you want to. So that was pretty good right there, though. So honestly, and the weird, shocking thing with this game is the fact that Ubisoft, and this is like way after the fact. Literally, this is like news that happened like within like the past week or so. They literally said that Sparks of Hope has underperformed. And it's kind of interesting how they said it underperformed when literally I feel like it still did fairly good. I know it probably will or eventually will sell up in the millions if it hadn't already done so of copies. I feel like most people are getting baited because they kind of remember how cheap that Mario and Rabbids Kingdom Battle is. Literally, because at some points you saw that game drop all the way down to $20. At one point you saw it drop down. I remember drop down almost all the way to 15, and that was like physically. And then even digitally, it would drop down almost down as low as within the 20s or a little bit less than that and be like the gold edition. So that didn't even included all the DLC. So there's a good amount of people out there, such as myself, that literally are waiting for this game to drop to be almost dirt cheap, maybe get the DLC with it for a good price too before we dip in and actually get the game as well. I mean, not only was I only just personally waiting for the game to get a little bit cheaper though, but there was a lot of games coming out in that final stretch leading through the holidays where I was like, I just don't have time to go through and play this. If I bought it, it's just going to be sitting over there, and then maybe by the time I actually do manage to buy it or not buy it, by the time I do manage to actually get my hands on it and actually play it, if I waited and bought it then, I probably could have got it for cheaper. So that's just honestly my personal thinking on it though. But yeah, so honestly, I still think this game is going to sell quite a bit. The actual revenue of what it gets, if a lot of people buy it on sale, that's yet to be seen though. But I wouldn't say it's like a drastic failure or anything like that, but maybe it just didn't hit the projections of what they might have personally thought it could have. But I think in correspondence to this, Ubisoft did say that they're really just only going to focus on their major hit IPs, such as like their Assassin's Creeds and whatnot, though. So a little bit of negative stuff. I think this might be the final Mario and Rabbids game we might get, especially if they're saying that that underperformed for them. So the fact that it's basically like a duology, we just got two of them. That's all right in my book. I don't think we need like a whole bunch of more, but for what it did, I think it's pretty cool though. So yeah, so we did have that game come out on October the 20th. Now, a day later, Persona 5 Royal finally dropped for other consoles outside of the PlayStation. We had it on the Xbox as well as you can get it on Game Pass. It dropped on the Nintendo Switch as well. And I think there was like what a PS5 remaster copy of it that runs at 60 frames per second. Also that dropped on the PlayStation 5 as well though. But finally, we managed to get Persona on the Nintendo Switch. And for all of those fans out there, I was like, I'm thankful that y'all are able to finally go through and play through this game because honestly, I was through waiting. And I was like, there was a lot of other games that was coming out on the PlayStation 5 that also piqued my interest. I got it in the year like 2021 during the summer. And I got the PS5 literally a week later. I bought Persona 5 Royal. It's like one of the first few games I went through and actually fully beat, though. But yeah, so that was a really amazing game. It was a game that was so good that I actually managed to double dip on it. I did buy a Switch version of it via the limited edition that Sega was selling on their store. Dang, that stupid shipping though. I was like, what the heck? I don't know why they charge an arm and a leg for some of their stuff they sell out of that store, but I was like, what the heck? But I wanted to get something limited edition for one of my most favorite third party games of all time. So I was willing to double dip for a game I actually enjoyed because I don't normally do that a lot unless it's technically a remake, but then by remake extension, it's not necessarily double dipping though. But yeah, so honestly, yeah, so now I can play it on the Switch, I can play it on the PS5, whichever one of those systems I feel up to my fancy though. But I think it has its advantages for being on the Switch, so that way you can literally pick it up, play it out in small little bursts, no matter where you are, and you're not just necessarily tied up to your TV going through because that is a big beefy game. We're talking about upwards to like 120 hours ish, especially if you wind up doing the royal content that's tacked on with the third semester. As long as you do like your right stuff leading up to it, so that way you don't get necessarily locked out of that route though. But yeah, so honestly, some really good stuff. Glad to see Persona finally make the jump over to other consoles as well. And we also had news that technically, yes, Persona 3 Portable and 4 Golden were coming to like the Switch and Xbox and all of that stuff a little bit later. And that happens to be out coming out in the month of January, which literally it's from the time of this podcast, literally gonna come out, was it today's Sunday? Literally going to come out in like 4 days from now. So we don't have much longer to wait for Persona 4 Golden and 3 Portable to come out though. But it was a nice to have that announced at the what was it? It was like one of Nintendo's partner showcase third party partner showcases, whatever though. That literally showcased off that event. Wait, hold on. Was it that or was it a fall direct? Shoot, I can't remember at this point. I think maybe it was a fall direct. Mm, no, maybe it was a fall direct. Golly, it's sometimes hard to kind of keep all of this stuff situated and sorted out, right? But yeah, so honestly, really good news. Glad we finally had Persona on the Switch. So if you're a big Smash player and you wanted to see where this character come from, now you have that open to you. Next up on the list, I have Bayonetta 3 that came out on October the 28th. Now, Bayonetta 3, golly, that was an interesting lead up to release date because there was so much controversy that was going around with this game, the lead up to it with Helena Taylor and the voice actors and stuff like that. The original voice actor of Bayonetta, when in Bayonetta's 1 and 2, she literally came out and said, "Hey, they're not paying me enough for this role. They're undercutting me and all of this stuff." She basically lied about quite a bit of stuff. Turn around, we tried to go, a lot of different news outlets were reporting on this and stuff like that, fact checking and all of this stuff. It turns out that she wasn't telling the truth or necessarily the whole truth or whatnot though. So it kind of gave her a bad reputation. Literally, I remember Platinum Games literally had to come out and make a statement on their Twitter account about the whole story and whatnot though. It was some major news. I literally reported back on it on one of my ZardCast podcast episodes. You can find that one out there on my channel if you wanted to, or on whatever podcast server you're listening to this on right now. If you wanted to hear about that whole scenario and whatnot though. But yes, but honestly, the big main thing we pulled out of that was like, hey, voice actors should be paid a little bit more so for their work though. Is this unfortunate how she went about kind of bringing it up and basically almost maybe have ruined her whole career. So I don't think we'll probably see her coming back and voicing Bayonetta in the future. More than likely not, because she probably broke NDA and all of that stuff though. So yeah, a little bit unfortunate though. But as for the game itself, it seemed to be pretty solid. I think some people were kind of mixed on the ending though, but overall, it was just a fine Bayonetta game. Wasn't nothing super great or nothing like that. But I think most Bayonetta fans they found the game to be pretty okay. Not maybe as good as maybe Bayonetta 2 or something like that, but something on the lines of that. But it turned out to be a pretty good, okay game at best. Now, that's pretty much it in terms of most of the games that came out for the month of October. So now let's go ahead and jump over into the month of November because with this one, on November the 8th, we had the release of Sonic Frontiers. Man, oh man, this was crazy with the lead up to this game, similar to Bayonetta 3, where I remember back in the summertime when they did IGN's first, and that was the first showcase of Sonic within Sonic Frontiers. A lot of people were super skeptical. They were like, "What? This combat is kind of bland. It looks kind of boring. Like you're just gonna do this over and over. What are these little puzzles for and all of this stuff?" I've never seen a game go from that and doing a complete 180 to the point of launch where once we had it at launch and people started going hands on with the game, they're like, oh, this is actually a solid Sonic game. Now, I didn't manage to pick it up at launch. I picked it up a little later, like closer to when Black Friday deals started happening, because I managed to snag it for like $40, and I was like, oh, okay, for that price, that's pretty good. And it went into my backlog. I didn't manage to play it until literally this early part of 2023 in the month of January. I literally just finished this game yesterday, and oh shoot, this game is actually really good. I didn't think the open zone aspect of it would have been really good, but it kind of grew on me the more and more I ran through there. They have certain areas set up in zones where it's like there's literally traditional levels up in there, like your traditional 3D levels and whatnot, though. The ones that were acting like 2D levels kind of sucked. I wasn't really a big fan of that, though. But with the 3D ones, I thought they were really good. I think out of most 3D ones, there might have been a couple of annoying ones when you're trying to go through and get all those red rings. But outside of that, if there was a 3D level within those traditional Sonic levels, I enjoyed almost every single one of those. The bosses were really cool. The level up system with your speed, maximum rings, attack, and defense was interesting. Though, if they were to do a sequel of Sonic Frontiers in the future, I hope they kind of make that a little bit better because you can cheese it quite a bit by doing the big fish and whatnot. Though, like that, like you literally could probably max out all your stuff within the first world, and thus by extension, make everything else you do after the fact within your next islands that you explore after that. Make it significantly easier though. But I won't go much more into that. Otherwise, I'm basically reviewing the game at this point though. But honestly, I thought the game was pretty solid, pretty enjoyable, and I'm curious to see what will be up next for Sonic fans in terms of the next game that comes after Sonic Frontiers. Will it be necessarily another open zone game where it kind of feels open world, but not necessarily? Or will we go back to like traditional 3D Sonic? Who knows at this point? Who knows? But the Sonic team, they might be onto something. They might be onto something. But yeah, so that was it for that right there. Next up, God of War Ragnarok came out literally a day later after Sonic Frontiers, literally the very next day, November 9th. And for all I can see on this game, a lot of people really did like and enjoy this. It does seem like, at least with this game, it is going to be a duology. So you have, the God of War originally from the PS4, and then you have Ragnarok that came out on this. So it's the only two that are going to be considered in its own series. So at least with this, I think a lot of fans really did like and enjoy this game. From what I heard, the story seemed to be pretty cool. Some people were kind of mixed on the ending though, but it does lead into questions like what would be next in terms of this God of War series? Do they pick like a different person? Do they move from like Norse mythology, jump back over to maybe Greek mythology, or maybe go with Egyptian? I don't know. There's a lot of room and flexibility in terms of where they can basically take this series next. But it does seem like, you know, in terms of our big boy over here, it does seem like it's the end of his storyline right here, though. So honestly, pretty good. Maybe at some point I'll probably will go through and play this game, or at least play, the first one, the 2018 version of the game. Maybe I'll go and play that at some point though. But at least for most PlayStation users, there were honestly, when it came down to the game of the year, it was literally between God of War Ragnarok and Elden Ring was literally like the only two that we probably knew that could have a chance at winning game of the year. Because it was like almost a foregone conclusion. Most people knew that Elden Ring was going to win it, but God of War was the only one that could really almost stand up to it at this point, though. But yes, honestly, that game came out, seemed pretty solid. Seemed pretty solid enough. And then after that, Pokemon Scarlet and Violet that came out on November the 18th. Now, this game right here, oh freaking shoot, man, this game, the lead up to it, I thought it was pretty okay. I like how they kind of keep their hands kind of close to their chest, and they only show like a limited amount of Pokemon. They don't even show like the final evolutions. Because I remember like what back in the Sun and Moon days, they literally showcase off every little bit of news or every little bit of things where we almost knew the whole entire game before we even played it. And thankfully, they don't even do that anymore. And I think once we had our hands on the game, the biggest thing that glared out with most people was the performance. The game would drop in frames. You would literally glitch out. The game would crash on you. They do a whole bunch of stuff that people were reporting on. You literally saw like what your character like grows super big, or the Pokemon grows super big, or whatever. Like largely bigger on scale than what they actually should supposed to be. And honestly, I was looking at all that. I was like, dang, this is crazy. Even when I was going through and playing through the game actually crashed on me. So yes, the performance I think was the biggest thing that was hitting this game. Because other than that, if the performance was up to snuff, I think this game would have potentially blown up really big, even more so. But I say would have blown up. It still technically blew up because it blew all of the previous records for any game that dropped on a Nintendo console in history. Because I think on launch day, golly, I'm trying to remember what's the actual statistic. Because I think within like the first few days, was it upward to 8 or 10 million copies sold within the first few days for Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. Hold on, let me look this up here. Many copies. Scarlet. Yeah. So literally globally, in the span of 72 hours, so that was 3 days, it sold upward north of 10 million copies. That was by it blew every game out of the water. We had a lot of games that blew up within like the first few days, but none to the level of Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. So I was like, that in itself is absolutely crazy to the Z just within the span of few days. And literally, if you were to, you know, iron out the if you're iron out the performances, oh shoot, they would have been on to something right here though. And that didn't even include it going into the holiday season. That was like right at the launch. So I'm curious to know exactly by the time we hit to the end of the fiscal year, how many copies Scarlet and Violet will actually have sell. Because I know they got more in plan for this game. And literally, it was like, what, maybe a couple or a few weeks after the game has dropped, even Nintendo came out with a statement saying, yeah, we listened to player feedback quite a bit, and we're always going to deliver a quality product. And basically, on the lines of expect some patches in the future. That's what we can basically look forward to within this game now. And we know that a patch is supposed to be coming. I think roughly around the month of March when they're supposed to try to incorporate Pokemon Home up into the system as well. So at that point where you're able to transfer and put any kind of Pokemon into Home or Home back into your Switch versions of these copies of games. We should get an update on that. Now, granted, whether or not we're gonna get like a sizable performance upgrade or whatnot, though, or does it fix mainly bug crashes? That's gonna be yet to be seen, though. But there is gonna be plans on that, though. So overall, it was a pretty good, fun game. Nice to see that it was like open world for the first time, and it kind of reminded me of Legends Arceus in some aspects. In some aspects better, some aspects I still kind of prefer Legends Arceus, but overall it was a fun game. Literally, the only thing I need to go through now is finish the last bit of post game, catch the four legendaries. I think I'll be about done with the game until they drop some DLC, which inevitably it will be coming at some point. Literally, you can look up in the northeast corner of that map and you can tell that there's some areas that you cannot touch, and that just looks super unnatural. So you know there's gonna be something up there in that map that's gonna be unlocked via DLC or something like that. Probably be announced around Pokemon Day, which should be coming up. What was it, February the 27th? So yeah, here fairly soon for that though too. But yeah, so that's gonna basically do it in terms of all of the games that we gotten within the month of November that I wanted to talk about. Last up, we got a couple more in the month of December. And with December, we have Dragon Quest Treasures. That game came out on December the 9th. I know that's a game my good buddy Sonic Q was going through and playing. I know he's been going through and chugging along in this. And I know if he were here, he'll be able to actually give some of his thoughts up on this, though. But with this game, though, it does seem nice that we actually had another Dragon Quest game that actually kind of focuses on Eric going through and with his what was it, his sister, I think, and I think his name was Eric. But going through and basically hunting for treasure, but you're also having like monsters aid you by your side. So it's a little different combination though. But it is one of the Dragon Quest projects that was announced back in, there was like a big Dragon Quest direct thing or whatever. I remember streaming or whatnot and watching it with Sonic Q though, but this is like one of the few things that they announced during that presentation though. And I think like what the next one of the next few things that we have is that will be coming up will literally be we know that Dragon Quest 3 HC2D is coming up here fairly soon, and then obviously Dragon Quest 12. That's going to be a pretty big and massive game right there. It might be a little on the darker side though, but having a little more Dragon Quest is always good in my book though. So yeah, that did come out in the early part of December, and then one of the last but not least notable games I want to mention was Crisis Core Final Fantasy VII Reunion Mans to drop. Originally, they had it slated to winter. Luckily, it managed to fall into the very last bit of December right here for that year. And honestly, I never went through and played through Crisis Core myself at all, period. So I never knew about Zack and the stuff in the pre-log of events that led up to the events of Final Fantasy VII. but it was nice for me to go through and be able to experience this because through this thing, because I think this is like one of the few games that was left on the PlayStation Vita and or Vita or Portable. It was one of those two. And never made the jump over to consoles unless you were like playing with like the PlayStation TV thing or whatever though. But from what I heard from most people, that was like an iconic game on that system. And it's like literally, if you mention that system, it was like one of the first things that probably anybody would probably bring up or whatnot, though. But now it's kind of nice to know where that whole reference where that meme where it's like Zach says me Gungaga. Like now I actually understand where that came from. I always saw it all over the place on Twitter though, but now I can actually now I have some context for that though. But honestly, that game it was really nice being able to pop all your different be able to pop off all your different attacks, be able to pop off all your magic and stuff like that. And then the story that it also told, I was like, it put a lot of stuff retrospectively to the knowledge of what I knew about Final Fantasy VII, and then finally pieced together all those information. So it was really nice to see that though. But the interesting thing to notice, the timing of them releasing this game, and we know that Final Fantasy VII Rebirth is literally coming out this upcoming winter. Could slip into the very end, maybe December again for 2023, or probably the early part of the year 2024, depending on how much they want to space Final Fantasy 16 that comes out literally in the month of June though, before it though. But it's interesting how they dropped that out because literally when you look at that trailer, you literally see Zach bringing up Cloud upward to what seems to be looking like Midgard or whatever though, and then you also saw Sephiroth walking. You saw like those feathers from the one wing angels and all of that stuff. I have a feeling there's a reason why they brought back Crisis Core right before Rebirth because I feel like they're going to be hitting some of those moments in Crisis Core and incorporating that within the baseline Final Fantasy VII remake series with Rebirth. I feel like that's the main reason why though. But honestly, it was a really great, phenomenal game. Really nice. I did manage to stream that on Twitch, at least my second half of it. So if you want to check that out, it's not available on Twitch anymore. Because for some odd reason, Twitch only likes to keep videos as long as you're not like a partner or whatever. I only like to keep it up there for a week. But those 4 parts that I have, they're on my extras channel though. So you can go ahead and check that out over there though. But yeah, that's pretty much it in terms of all the stuff I had to talk about within my year in review. And that basically does it for my whole entire year in review for 2022. So yeah, so I talked about the first part of all the games that came out from January to June within my episode 48 of my ZardCast podcast, and just concluded everything from July to December for my part 2 here in this podcast though. So honestly, a lot of games have came out this year, a whole bunch that I actually managed to go through and play. And then a whole bunch that I know some of my friends have played, or just some notable ones I know a lot of people in the community have gone through and played though. But 2022 was overall a really good and solid year for gaming though. But I think 2023 might be even better though. But holy shoot, yeah, a lot of stuff came out this year, a lot of good things. But let me know in the comments if you happen to be watching this on the YouTube version, or just at me on Twitter or whatnot. Though, if you listen to the audio version of this podcast, though, let me know what were some of your most favorite games that you managed to go through and play this year. Whether it's the new stuff in 2022 that I all went through and mentioned, or even some old stuff that happened to be in your backlog and you finally managed to go through and do that. Because shoot, there was a few games I actually managed to work through some of my backlog in that year though, but obviously I was just only focusing on the brand new stuff right there though. But yeah, that's pretty much gonna do it in terms of that. And that will basically conclude it for my Zarcast podcast episode 49. Now, normally I would have done like the what you've been playing, so about the show and all of that stuff though, but at least with these first couple of things, it's not a lot's going on early in the month of January. I just primarily focus on my year in review aspect along with my couple of gaming news topics though. But yeah, so that's basically gonna do it in terms of this podcast though. So if you really liked it, make sure to go ahead and hit that like button, go ahead and hit the subscribe button and the bell to stay up to date on all things gaming that I feel like talk about and discussing here on my channel though. If you happen to be watching this podcast on one of my podcast servers, whether it be Google, Apple, Spotify, Amazon Music, etc. Make sure to go and hit the like, go ahead and share that podcast around, just let them know and say, hey, I'm just a dude that really likes gaming, some pop culture things here and there though. I just like, sit down, just talking with y'all, bi-weekly on the most relevant stuff that happens to come out though. But yeah, that's basically gonna do it for this episode though. So remember, y'all, until whatever video I make next, and until my ZardCast episode 50, which reminder, it's gonna be a pretty big one. I got some plans for that one. It's gonna be a special one. Never thought I would actually manage to hit quite up to 50 episodes right there, but you can definitely look forward to that one. So remember, y'all, until the next ZardCast episode podcast, that being episode 50, I will see y'all later.